I guess the beginning of the end of my marriage started with what I thought was merely a rough patch. Rebecca and I had been together for over 7 years, and while we'd had our share of ups and downs, I always believed we were solid. I mean, who doesn't have fights about the mundane stuff, right? Bills, groceries, the temperature in the house. At first, it was just her typical busyness with her job at the Affordable Housing Coalition. She'd come home late, often saying she had meetings with clients or volunteers. I admired her dedication to her work, but I started to wonder if it was more than just work for her. Then there were the little things. She started putting on makeup before leaving the house, which was unusual since she usually preferred a more natural look. And her phone, it was like it had become a third wheel in our marriage. She was glued to it, texting and laughing, but whenever I'd ask her who she was talking to, she'd brush it off with a dismissive wave and a, "oh, just work stuff." I didn't pry. Who was I to question how she handled her job? But the nagging feeling in my gut kept growing. I spotted a few texts pop up on her screen one day while she was busy in the kitchen. A name I didn't recognize, Jason. It could have been anyone, but right then I felt a jolt of electricity shoot through me. I wanted to dismiss it. After all, we had friends named Jason. But that name echoing in my mind, combined with Rebecca's increasingly distant behavior, made it hard to ignore any longer. Then came the fateful night when everything unraveled. I had decided to surprise her with a nice dinner, something to bring back the spark we seemed to be losing. I left work early, picked up some fresh flowers, and made my way home, envisioning her face lighting up when she saw the table set for two. But as I approached our front door, I noticed her car wasn't in the driveway. My stomach dropped as I checked the time. She should have been home by then. I tried calling her. Nothing. I texted. Still nothing. The flowers sat wilting on the counter, and the pasta I had prepared was turning cold. After about an hour of packing, I decided to go for a drive. I drove past her office thinking maybe she'd be wrapping up late, but as I rounded the corner, my heart sank. There was her car parked outside a bar just a few blocks from her workplace. That's when I saw them. Rebecca laughing and leaning into another man, Jason. He had his arm around her waist, and they were sharing a moment that I had thought was only ours. I felt like a balloon that just got popped and I was deflating into nothingness. My mind raced. I can't believe this. My stomach churned as I watched them through the window. It was as if all the air had been sucked out of my lungs, leaving me gasping for breath. I wanted to scream, confront her right then and there, but I knew that would be a mistake. I was frozen, unable to process the scene unfolding before my eyes. Instead, I drove home, each bump in the road jarring me back to the reality of what I just witnessed. When she finally walked through the door, I was waiting, heart pounding in my chest, the lump in my throat tightening with every second she was late. I couldn't hide my expression. The shock and betrayal were written all over my face. She smiled, completely unaware that I knew her secret. It was surreal, really. Here she was, walking in like everything was normal, like she hadn't just betrayed everything we had built together. I confronted her right then and there. I asked her who Jason was, and watching her face drain of color was both satisfying and agonizing. She stuttered, trying to weave a web of excuses, claiming I was overreacting, that she was just helping him out with the coalition. But I didn't buy it. She was lying, and she knew I knew it. I was angry, hurt, and felt utterly humiliated. The confrontation spiraled downhill from there. All her explanations crumbled under the weight of my hurt. She tried to dismiss my feelings with claims that I was being paranoid, but the hurtful words cut deeper than any knife ever could. I felt like I was standing on quicksand, the ground literally shifting beneath my feet. At that moment, I realized that the woman I had devoted my life to was gone, replaced by someone I didn't even recognize. The anger boiled within me, but so did the realization that this wasn't going to be the end of it. I needed a plan. I wouldn't let her get away with this. I'd build something stronger, a foundation that couldn't be compromised, even if it meant tearing down the old structures first. I just needed time to formulate my revenge. The days following my discovery were a blur of emotions. I was caught in a strange limbo between anger and sadness, constantly replaying the confrontation in my mind. Rebecca acted like nothing had happened. She would go about her daily routine, casual as ever, while I felt like I was living in a parallel universe where everything was familiar yet completely foreign. I needed to wrap my head around what was happening. I immersed myself in work, throwing myself into projects that I'd previously been indifferent towards. It was easier to focus on the chaos of deadlines rather than dwell on the chaos of my personal life. I spent long hours at the office, and when I finally did come home, I often found her sprawled out on the couch, glued to her phone, completely absorbed in whatever fantasy world she had crafted with this guy Jason. In the nights, while she was sleeping, I would lie awake, consumed by thoughts. Part of me wanted to confront her again, to scream the truth into her face, but I knew that wouldn't bring me any satisfaction. I needed to think through my next steps. I had to strategize. One evening, as I scrolled through social media, a post caught my eye. It was from a local construction company that specialized in affordable housing. They were looking for volunteers to help with building homes. I had always admired the work they did, and in that moment a plan sparked in my mind. This could be my outlet, my way to channel the pain into something productive. Not only could I help the community, but I could also build something new, something ethical and strong, unlike the deception that had plagued my marriage. I signed up to volunteer. The next weekend, I found myself on a construction site, surrounded by hardworking folks who genuinely cared about improving their community. It was liberating. I felt like I was reclaiming some control over my life. I threw myself into the work, learning to hammer nails, lay foundations, and build walls. Every swing of the hammer felt like a cathartic release, each nail driven home representing a small victory against the betrayal I was grappling with. As I immersed myself in this new project, I learned more about the coalition Rebecca worked for. I began to understand the ethical construction principles they claimed to stand by, and found myself questioning everything they did. I delved into research about building codes, sustainability, and community impact. Something twisted in my gut every time I thought about how she was betraying that very mission while carrying on an affair with someone who was supposed to support those values. As the weeks rolled on, I kept the facade of my marriage intact in front of Rebecca. I would engage her in conversations about work, feigning interest in the projects she had going on. I wanted to gather more information, to find out just how deep this deception ran. One night I came home later than usual after a long day at the site. I found her in the living room, her facial expression a mix of surprise and annoyance. "Where have you been?" She shot at me, an edge in her voice. "I was working on the new community center," I replied, keeping my tone bland. "What's going on with you? Any more meetings with Jason?" I watched as her eyes widened, the anger flaring up. "How dare you bring him up?" she snapped, her voice rising. "You're the one who's been distant. You're just trying to blame me for your own issues." I felt a surge of rage but suppressed it. I had to keep my cool. "Distant? I've been working hard. You're the one who's been sneaking around." Her defensiveness only fueled my resolve. I needed to gather evidence to ensure I could confront her with everything I had. I began to track her movements, noting the times she would leave the house, making mental notes of the little lies she told. Each time she would go out, I would subtly ask where she was going. "Just meeting some friends," she would say, and I could hear the lie in her voice. But I also started to hear whispers about her working late with Jason. Colleagues from the coalition would casually mention their late-night meetings at bars and restaurants that were not work-related at all. It became abundantly clear that this was more than just a few friendly drinks. The anger boiled over one night while I was at a bar with some of the guys from the construction site. I overheard a couple of friends discussing their experiences with infidelity, and it felt like they were speaking directly to my situation. The emotions came flooding back, and I felt the need to act. I was done with the passive approach. It was time to execute my plan. I started to leverage my new network. I discreetly began asking around about Rebecca and Jason, gathering information. I wanted to know everything about their affair. I wanted to know their schedules, where they went, and what they did. I was building an arsenal, preparing for the moment I would lay everything bare. It would be a moment of reckoning, a final act of justice in a world that felt so unjust. With every passing day, I built more than just homes. I was building my own resolve. I was no longer the passive husband waiting for things to change. I was going to take control of my life and my happiness, and I was going to make sure Rebecca faced the consequences of her actions. I just needed to be patient. I could see the light at the end of the tunnel, and I was determined to walk through it. The weeks turned into months, and my life became a strange blend of construction work and the passive aggression of my marriage. While I volunteered and learned about building strong, ethical homes, my home life with Rebecca felt more like a house of cards, teetering on the edge of collapse. She still insisted on keeping her work life separate from home, and honestly, I was grateful for it. It made my investigations easier. I had collected a decent amount of evidence that painted a picture I couldn't ignore. I had watched her lie to my face, and now I was piecing together the truth like a puzzle. I worked late nights often, and during those times I noticed Rebecca would get dressed up, her makeup meticulously applied, slipping on the same tight black dress I had given her for our anniversary. It was like watching a movie where I already knew the tragic ending, yet I was still stuck in the theater, unable to leave. One fateful Saturday, while I was working at the construction site, I received a message from a friend who worked with Rebecca's coalition. "Dude, you might want to check out the Blue Note tonight. Heard Jason and Rebecca are going to be there." My heart raced. I couldn't believe my luck, or rather my opportunity. I spent the rest of the day trying to play it cool, mentally preparing myself for what I was about to do. I needed to confront this head-on, and the thought of it filled me with both dread and exhilaration. I left the site early and went home to take a shower, steeling myself for what was to come. I dressed carefully, wanting to strike a balance between casual and put together. As I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized the man staring back at me. I had transformed from the passive, hurt husband to someone driven by a need for justice. The Blue Note was a trendy bar, known for its live music and vibrant atmosphere. It was the perfect place for a couple of cheaters to feel hidden in plain sight. As I walked in, the dim lights and the sound of chatter enveloped me. I spotted them. Almost immediately, Rebecca was sitting at the bar, laughing too freely, leaning in way too close to Jason. I felt a sudden rush of anger, my blood boiling at the sight. I managed to find a spot where I could observe without being seen. I took a deep breath and steeled myself, letting the moment wash over me. I noticed how Jason treated her. Every laugh and touch felt like a knife twisting in my gut. It was intimate and familiar, and I could see that she was enjoying every second of it. I wanted to march up to her and expose everything right there, but a part of me held back. I wanted to gather more evidence, to have something concrete, an undeniable truth that would shatter her facade. I took out my phone, discreetly snapping pictures as they chatted, her head thrown back in laughter, his hand brushing her arm. With each click, I could feel my resolve hardening. I was no longer the victim. I was the architect of a new plan. Then something unexpected happened. I noticed another couple come up to them, friends apparently. They greeted Rebecca like an old friend, and suddenly the stakes felt higher. If I confronted her now, it could spiral out of control, leading to a scene I wasn't prepared for. I decided to stay hidden a bit longer, observing their interactions and gathering more evidence. As the night progressed, they moved to a booth in the corner, and that's when I caught something that made my heart race. Rebecca leaned in and whispered something to Jason that made him laugh. He reached over, running his fingers across her cheek, and my heart sank. I couldn't believe that this was the woman I had loved and trusted, the one I had built a life with. Fueled by the sight of her betrayal, I stepped outside to gather my thoughts. Breathing in the cool night air, I ran through the plan I had formulated in my mind. I wouldn't just confront her, I would expose everything. I needed to collect the right evidence to ensure it would hurt her the way she had hurt me. I had spent too long being the good husband, the one who trusted blindly, and now it was time to flip the script. The next day, I did something I had never thought I would do. I reached out to some of the people I had met at the construction site and told them about my situation. They were supportive and even offered to help me gather more intel. I felt a sense of camaraderie, a new family forming around me, one that valued honesty and integrity. As I planned my next move, I began to think about what exactly I wanted from this confrontation. Was it revenge, closure, a chance to rebuild my own life without her? I realized that I wanted her to see exactly what she was losing. I wanted her to feel the weight of her actions. I decided that I would confront her publicly, gather the evidence I had collected, and show her exactly who she had become. I wanted her to understand that I was no longer the man she could trample over. I was going to reclaim my power, and in doing so, I hoped to rebuild not just my life but the very foundations of my self-respect. The more I thought about it, the more I felt like I was preparing to build something stronger than any home, the strongest version of myself. I was ready to face her, ready to tear down the lies and the betrayal, and I was going to do it on my terms. The final confrontation was on the horizon, and I was determined to make it count. The day of the confrontation arrived like a storm gathering on the horizon. I was a bundle of nerves, excitement, and anxiety all rolled into one. I had planned everything meticulously, down to the way I would speak to Rebecca, the evidence I would present, and the emotional wall I would build around myself to keep the hurt at bay. I knew this was it, the moment I would reclaim my life. I decided to invite Rebecca to dinner. It was a casual suggestion framed as a chance for us to reconnect. She was thrilled, eager to go out, and I could see the glimmer of hope in her eyes. It was sickening, really, knowing that she had no idea of my intentions. As we sat across from each other in the restaurant, I tried to engage in light conversation, asking her about work, about her projects, and about her friendship with Jason. She was animated, her laughter ringing out like a bell, completely unaware of the turmoil brewing. Within me, I smiled along, feigning interest, all the while my heart pounded louder in my chest. After the appetizer, I decided to shift the conversation. You know, I've been thinking a lot about relationships. I started, watching her closely as the words rolled off my tongue. About trust and loyalty, how they're the foundations of any good partnership, right? She looked puzzled but intrigued. Of course they are. Why do you ask? I took a deep breath, my hands clasping the edge of the table. Well, I've been feeling like we've drifted apart lately, like there's something between us that's been compromised. Her expression shifted slightly, and for a split second I could see the panic behind her eyes. What do you mean? She asked, a flicker of defensiveness creeping into her voice. And that's when I laid it all out, my voice steady and clear. I know about Jason, Rebecca. I saw you two together. I have pictures. You can't lie your way out of this anymore. I watched as her face paled, the color draining from her cheeks. It was a moment of silence, heavy and weighted with the truth. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. I could see the gears in her mind turning, desperately trying to formulate an excuse or a denial. Caught off guard, huh? Surprising that I would find out about your late-night rendezvous. My voice was cold now, the anger simmering just below the surface. You think I'm just going to sit back and let you disrespect everything we built together? Her composure faltered completely, and she managed to stammer out, "It's not what you think." "I can explain." I interrupted her, my resolve hardening. "Explain what? That you've been lying to me, behaving like a stranger in my own home, that you've been flaunting your affair right under my nose." The words felt liberating as I unleashed the storm of truth, the years of hurt boiling over into a tidal wave of emotion. Rebecca's eyes darted around the restaurant, likely hoping for anyone to save her from this confrontation. "I never meant for it to happen. It just happened." Her voice trembled, the bitchy facade cracking wide open to reveal a desperate woman caught in her own lies. "Didn't mean for it to happen," I shot back, my voice rising. "That doesn't change the fact that you made a choice. You chose him over me, over us." I leaned forward, the weight of my feelings pressing down on her. "Every time you acted like I didn't matter, every time you chose to stay out late with him instead of coming home to your husband, you made that choice." The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. I could see the tears welling in her eyes, the realization of her actions crashing down on her like a wave. "I'm sorry," she finally whispered, but it felt hollow, a mere echo of remorse without any real substance behind it. "I don't want your apologies, Rebecca. They mean nothing now." I paused, letting the silence stretch between us, the weight of my words hanging in the air. What I want is for you to face the consequences of your actions. I deserve better than this." Her shoulders slumped and she looked defeated. The arrogance I had once known began to slip away, and in that moment I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. I had taken control, and I was not about to let her manipulate my emotions any longer. "Do you really love him?" I asked, my voice softer but still firm. "Was it worth it? Was he worth throwing away everything we had?" She looked away, unable to meet my gaze. "I don't know, okay? I was confused. It was a mistake," she admitted, but the words felt inadequate. The truth was she had made her choice, and now it was time for me to make mine. I took out my phone and pulled up the photos I had taken. Each snapshot was a reminder of her betrayal, a testament to the lies she had told. "I have these," I said slowly, "and I'm going to show them to everyone. I won't let you get away with this." Her eyes widened in panic, her desperation spilling over. "Please don't, you can't do that." "I can and I will," I replied, my voice resolute. "Don't think I'll keep quiet while you continue to parade around as the dedicated wife. You need to face what you've done." I slid the phone back into my pocket, feeling a wave of empowerment. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental. I was no longer the victim. I was the one calling the shots. The man I had been was gone, and in his place stood someone who demanded respect and was willing to fight for it. As we finished our dinner in silence, I could feel the tension lingering between us, but I refused to let it consume me any longer. I had learned what betrayal felt like, and now I was committed to rebuilding myself, brick by brick, with the strength I had found within. I left the restaurant feeling lighter, the weight of the confrontation lifting my spirits. I had taken the first step toward a new beginning, and I was ready to see where it would lead me. No matter what happened next, I knew one thing for sure. I was going to build a life that could never be compromised again. After the confrontation, I felt a strange mixture of relief and trepidation. I had not only confronted Rebecca, but had also exposed the truth of her betrayal. The weight of the lies and deceit had been lifted, at least temporarily. But I knew this was just the beginning, not the end. The fallout was inevitable, and I had to be ready for whatever came next. In the days that followed, I focused on my work at the construction site, pouring my energy into building homes for those in need. Each nail I hammered down felt like a reclaiming of my sense of self. The camaraderie of my new friends and colleagues kept me grounded, and I found solace in conversations filled with honesty, integrity, and respect. They reminded me what it meant to be surrounded by people who cared. Meanwhile, Rebecca's attempts to reach out were relentless. She would text and call, leaving messages filled with apologies and pleas for forgiveness. I felt a flicker of sympathy for her, but it was drowned out by the anger I had cultivated. I could see the desperation in her messages, the frantic need to explain herself, but I had no interest in hearing her excuses anymore. One evening, after a long day at the site, I finally mustered the strength to respond to her. "I need space. We need to figure out what this all means." I texted back, keeping it short and to the point. I had no intention of diving back into the emotional chaos we had created together. I needed clarity, and right now, all I felt toward her was betrayal. The next day, I met with some close friends for drinks. They had been my support system through the emotional roller coaster of the past few months. I shared the details of my confrontation with Rebecca, and they rallied around me, offering encouragement and support. "You did the right thing," one friend, Tyler, said. "You deserve someone who values you, not someone who treats you like an option." Their words resonated within me, reinforcing the resolve I had built. Yet in the back of my mind, I still grappled with the reality of my marriage. I had dedicated years to it, invested my heart and soul into building a partnership. Now that foundation felt like it was crumbling beneath me. A few days later, Rebecca requested to meet. I reluctantly agreed, but set the boundaries. "We can meet, but only to talk about the divorce," I told her, feeling a mix of dread and empowerment. She arrived at the coffee shop looking fragile, her eyes puffy and red from crying. The sight tugged at my heartstrings, but I quickly reminded myself that this was about closing a chapter, not reopening old wounds. As we sat across from each other, the air was thick with unspoken words. "I'm so sorry for everything," she began, her voice trembling. "I messed up and I understand if you can never forgive me." I took a deep breath, bracing myself for the emotional exchange. "Rebecca, I can't just brush this under the rug. You chose to betray me. You broke my trust when you needed it the most." She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I know, I was stupid, selfish. I didn't know how to handle everything and I let you down. I never meant to hurt you." The sorrow in her voice was palpable, but I felt a numbness creeping in. I had already processed my anger and hurt. Now it was about moving forward. "I think we both know this isn't going to work out. I can't stay in a relationship built on lies. Is there any way we can work this out? I can do better. I want to do better," she pleaded, desperation bleeding through her words. The internal struggle was overwhelming. Part of me wanted to reach out to comfort the woman I once loved, but I had to stay strong. "I don't think that's possible. Trust is foundational and you've shattered that. I need to walk away." With each word I spoke, I felt lighter. The burden of indecision was lifting. The reality of our situation settled in as we discussed the logistics of the divorce, separating finances, dividing possessions, everything that would lead to our final separation. By the end of our conversation, I knew it wasn't just a divorce that was taking place. It was a transformation. I was shedding the layers of hurt and betrayal and stepping into a new version of myself. I realized that I had the power to redefine my life and carve out a new path. Once I left the coffee shop, I felt a sense of finality wash over me. I was ready to move on, to start anew. It was a bittersweet feeling. I had once envisioned a future with Rebecca, but now that vision was shattered. Still, I had a newfound determination to build something better for myself. As the weeks went by, I continued to focus on my work and my friends. I began to rediscover passions I had set aside during the marriage. I took up painting, something I had loved in my youth, and it became a therapeutic outlet. Each stroke of the brush felt like a release, a way to express the emotions I had kept bottled up for so long. I began to feel whole again, learning to appreciate the beauty of life beyond the pain of betrayal. I understood that I had to build a new foundation, not just for my future relationships, but for myself. I was determined to create a life where I valued my worth, one that would not be compromised by lies or manipulation. One night, as I stood back to admire a painting I had just completed, I felt a sense of pride. This was a reflection of my journey, a journey of healing, strength, and resilience. I had learned the hard way that sometimes the strongest foundations are built after everything has crumbled away, allowing for new growth. And just like the homes I had helped build, I would ensure my new life would stand firm, built upon honesty, respect, and love for myself first and foremost. The journey ahead would be challenging, but I was ready to face it head on, one step at a time. I was ready to rebuild. As I continued to immerse myself in my journey of self-discovery and healing, I realized that every step I took was a testament to my resilience. The months passed, and while the memories of Rebecca still lingered, they no longer held the same power over me. The pain of betrayal had transformed into a catalyst for growth, pushing me to confront not just the relationship, but also the man I had become. I stayed busy with my painting, volunteering at the construction site, and spending time with friends who uplifted and supported me. Each day felt like a brick being laid in the foundation of my new life. It was invigorating. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my own narrative. One evening, as I sat in my studio, surrounded by half-finished canvases and paint splatters on the floor, I received a text from Rebecca. It had been months since we had last spoken, and I felt a knot tighten in my stomach as I opened her message. She wanted to meet again. Against my better judgment, I agreed. I was curious about what she had to say, but I prepared myself for the emotional toll it could take. The meeting was set for a nearby park, a neutral ground where we could talk without the pressure of a restaurant or coffee shop. When I arrived, I found her sitting on a bench, her expression reflecting a mix of nervousness and determination. I took a seat next to her, maintaining a comfortable distance. There was an awkward silence between us, and I could feel the tension in the air as she gathered her thoughts. "Thanks for meeting me," she finally said, her voice shaky. "I know things ended badly between us and I'm really sorry. I've spent so much time reflecting on everything, and I wanted to explain more about why I acted the way I did." I nodded, unsure of how to respond. I had heard it all before, but I could see the sincerity in her eyes. There was a vulnerability that hadn't been there during our last conversation. I was in a really dark place. She continued, her voice trembling. "I felt overwhelmed by everything, work, our marriage, everything. I made terrible choices because I didn't know how to cope. I thought I could find happiness elsewhere, and I was so wrong. I lost sight of what was important." I listened, allowing her to express herself. I didn't want to dismiss her feelings outright. I knew she was struggling, but I also recognized that her actions had consequences. "I wish I could take it all back," she said, tears glistening in her eyes. "I never wanted to hurt you, and I understand if you can't forgive me. But I do want you to know that I'm trying to change. I'm in therapy now, and I'm working on being a better person." For a moment, I was struck by how different she seemed, less defensive, more open. It was clear that she was genuinely working on herself, and part of me felt empathy for her situation. But I also knew that I had to prioritize my own healing above everything else. "Rebecca, I appreciate you sharing this with me," I said slowly, "and I hope you really do find the help you need. But I also need to be honest with you. I've moved on. I'm rebuilding my life, and I can't go back to the way things were." Her expression fell, and I could see the hurt in her eyes. "I understand," she whispered, "and I don't expect you to. I just wanted to apologize and let you know that I'm working on becoming a better person, not just for you but for myself." We sat in silence for a while, watching the leaves rustle in the wind. I felt a sense of closure wash over me. It was a bittersweet moment. We had shared so much together, but ultimately we had grown apart in ways that could not be reconciled. As the sun began to set, casting a warm golden glow around us, I took a deep breath. "I think this is a good step for both of us," I said finally. "I hope you find happiness and peace in your life." She nodded slowly, a small smile breaking through her tears. "Thank you for that. I wish you the best, too." We stood up and exchanged a brief, awkward hug. One last connection before we truly went our separate ways. As I walked away, I felt a sense of liberation. It was as if I had finally closed the door on that chapter of my life, allowing me to step into a future filled with possibilities. The months that followed were filled with new experiences and growth. I continued to volunteer, paint, and explore the world around me. I even started dating again, cautiously opening my heart to the idea of love but ensuring I took my time. Each relationship I pursued was built on a foundation of honesty, respect, and open communication, values I now held dear after experiencing the fallout of betrayal. I was still learning, still growing, but I was doing it on my terms. Looking back, I could see how far I had come. I was no longer the passive husband who allowed himself to be manipulated. I had risen from the ashes of my pain and was building a life that was uniquely mine. I had learned the importance of self-worth and resilience, and I was determined to keep that lesson close to my heart. As I stood in front of one of my finished paintings, I felt a deep sense of pride. The vibrant colors reflected where I had been and where I was going. I was ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that I had the strength to face it head-on. No matter what challenges lay ahead, I knew I wouldn't merely survive, I would thrive. And in that realization, I found peace.